Oh, I didn't see you there. Hello. Today, we're here to talk about the latest entry into the Drop Commander universe, Operation Aristeus. Now, the PHR, having expelled the Scourge from the Tlaocan moons and secured the system for themselves, looked to the greater picture of the theater of war in the Drop universe and realized they need to expand the logistical capabilities. And so the first step is expanding their agricultural base. So they turned to their foremost experts in apiaryism because they find themselves in dire need of pollination in order to expand their agricultural capacity. Operation Artemis. Are you sure? I thought it was about be okay. Artemis, he said, right? All right. Oh, hello. We're here today to talk about the latest entry in the Drop Commander universe, Operation Artemis. Now, the PHR have always found themselves lacking in manpower in particular. It is their greatest weakness within the setting. They are powerful, but few in number. And so, now that they have expelled the Scourge and the Tlaocan moons and secured them for themselves, they have an opportunity to take a little bit of a respite and build themselves up. And in doing so, that means that they need to encourage their population to fuck. And so, Operation Artemis is all about encouraging fertility and fecundity throughout their population. Well, yeah, what do you mean? Artemis is the goddess of childbirth and childcare. What else would we be talking about? Everyone knows PHR is elite, few in number, strong in strength, they need more people. Wait, goddess of the fucking hunt? What are you talking? Alright, so it turns out the PHR are here just to kill some animals or whatever. So it's a fucking. Yeah, just kill some fucking. Ah!
So first, we'll take a quick look at the Arby's. You get 5 per sprue, 3 varieties, 2 mediums, 2 smalls, and 1 large. I painted these up pretty quick and lazily. It's washes and contrast, speed paint, whatever you want to call it, mostly. Because I just wanted to get them out quick. 10's not a ton, but I was feeling lazy. In any case, for the modeling stuff, there's a couple of things of note. The bases, you only get 8 that have a hole for the flight stem to go into, so they expect you to glue 2 of them directly to the base. Now, you can see in one of these promotional photos they put out leading up to the release of the game, is that they used the large one because it has this tail that you can glue it to, and it looks like it's still flying. If you glued this medium, the smalls, it would look like it's crawling, which that's okay. If you like that, that's fine. I thought it looked a little weird, and I prefer them flying overall. Luckily, I still had some small drop zone flight bases around, which are the almost exactly the same, maybe a millimeter or two off difference from what comes in the Artemis box. So I just snagged those and glued them on. The other reason I didn't want to do that for, in particular, using these large ones, is that, as you can see here, the model they used is a little different from what comes in the box, in that the abdomen, stomach, whatever area is fully modeled. All of these, they come with a circular recession to glue the stem directly into. And so if you didn't fill it up with putty or whatever, it would just look very unusual. So yeah, I thought it was much better. The other thing is just for the sake of variety, I also cut all these stems to slightly different levels to give a little more visual variety to them as they're flying around. It'll probably help if you're actually playing to keep them from like bumping into each other if you try to swarm onto a mech or something. Now, Sphinxes, you get 2 per sprue, and they're fairly similar variants. They have a little bit of posability to them. What's interesting is if you actually look at the piece you get off the sprue, the leg has a spot where it's clear there should be a tab slotting in, but the model itself is just smooth, which I don't know implies to me that originally they had it monopose and they decided to allow for a little bit of posability on them. They would just make it flat instead, but then didn't remodel the leg bit to account for that. That's okay though. Now these, they're going to have to be on a base. You can have one of the variants at least stand up on its own okay, but the slightest little bump or variation in terrain it will fall over. And the other one, if you pose it with the running, which let's see, I have this one here. Obviously, there's no way this is going to stand up on its own. Now, the base it comes with, this one, it is what is intended for the rules of the game. However, as all of these models can be used in Dropzone proper and not just this game, and there, generally things aren't modeled on a clear base like this unless they are flyers. I didn't really want to put them on a base. I instead put them on the standard looking kind of base that you can see here with this mauler. Infantry also come to bases. These are literally infantry bases that I filled in the gaps and painted over. If I wanted to play by the rules of Artemis, where base contact is relevant, you could always just put them on top of there and then move them around as such. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal, and I prefer to have them like this. I think it just looks better too to have them based properly as opposed to the clear ones, because it's just consistent with the rest of the model line and system. In any case, these have one kind of issue with them. I'll get to it when I go to the Minotaurs next. I did what I could to account for that with the modeling, have their legs angled to different bits and whatnot. This one's, of course, the running one. Overall, I like them, actually. I like these quite a bit. The sprue gates, there wasn't too many spots, I think, where it was too much of a hassle to get off. You're able to hide the bits pretty well. The only real thing here note I did beyond that is their two variants are so similar. I mixed and matched the legs on two of them to try to spice up the variety of them visually. It doesn't really, it's not too obvious. You can see in this one in particular, I don't know if that comes through. You can see where that flat bit, it doesn't really look great, but you don't see it too much on the table, honestly. Oh, so sorry. Let me get these out of here. Minotaurs. You get one per sprue. They are fairly large in compared to the Sphinx. And let me grab a harpy to bring over too. And they are the big bads of the fauna side. Now, for painting these, I decided that I would go pretty flamboyant with these spikes to make them pretty visually pop on the table, and the rest is pretty natural tone colors. They ended up kind of being this, I don't know, almost looks like that sort of generic cyberpunky sort of neon pink purplish kind of color. Only thing I'm missing, I suppose, would be the turquoises that pop up a lot in there. But I like them quite a bit, actually. The main critiques I have of the model would be, I don't like the ton too much. That's just personal taste. I think it's not a huge deal. The actual model itself, there is a gap right on here where the pieces fit together. And I thought I was able to seal it up pretty well, but I don't know if it comes through too much on camera. But after applying the wash, of course, it turns out that gap really wasn't sealed. The arms, of course, I definitely could have done a better job attaching the limbs here. You can just see this direct straight line there. Doesn't look fantastic, but it's not the end of the world there. Still, these are, I like these quite a bit too. I think the Sphinx are still my favorite of the three fauna, but Minotaur, the runners up, and Harpies are okay. Nothing against them. They're just okay, in my opinion. It's just a personal taste thing. In any case, the thing I wanted to mention that I alluded to with the Sphinxes, and one of my main critiques just of the fauna overall, is let me just put them all together next to each other. I do not like how they all look to the right. Obviously, the same model is going to be the same, but the Sphinxes, all their heads also curve to the right. I did what I could with the modeling to try to minimize the visual impact of that, but I wish they had had one of the Sphinxes look to the left or even straight forward a little bit more. It just bugs me. This is not remotely a deal breaker on the models themselves or anything. It's just annoyed me a bit the more I looked at them. The Harpies, thankfully, they come in good variety, and they don't have that same visual standout on the table. So even if they all were curved a little bit one side or another, you might not even notice as much. Now, that's not it for fauna. While the box comes just with the Minotaur, Sphinxes, and Harpies, separately, you can also get an apex or a bullhorn. Now, the bullhorn is actually a 3D print model you get from them. This apex, they first released this, I don't know, 5 years ago. And it's the one I got now was purchased back then. It's a resin model, but if you bought it now, it would also be a 3D print. The bullhorn in particular, they showed off a 3D render of this, God only knows when, sometime in the ancient past, and only finally just now had, I guess, a justification for putting it out between 3D print manufacturing and the Artemis set. Now, they both have rules for Dropzone and Artemis, just like the rest of the fauna, and they're a nice little avenue, I think, for expanding the game if they think the game is a success and they want to add on some little extra stuff so you can give them more money. Now, one other thing I didn't notice, I didn't mention this with the Minotaur. This is the base it comes with. I believe that both the Apex and the Bullhorn also sit on this base, but for similar reasons with the Sphinx, I didn't want to actually attach that permanently to the base like this, but it, again, will not be a problem to play a game with it like this. So now we have the PHR models. We got the four of them right here. They weren't too bad to build. There was a couple little things that came up. To begin with, they are pretty posable. The legs are single piece, so they are set to that bend. But the joint, the crotch piece, I suppose, the main torso and the arms, as well as the little miniguns on front, all have a pretty good amount of posability. The real issue I had building them is just these miniguns in the front kept getting in the way of poses that I wanted to do, where I had like weapons going in front or swinging down that way or anything like that. And so it did limit a little bit of how interesting I can make the pose. Additionally, like with the fauna, I didn't want to attach them to the base for the reasons I talked about. And I was a little concerned they'd be kind of top heavy, just looking at the pictures of them. But it's not too bad. They're fine. They're stable so long as you have 2 feet. If you try to do a more interesting, like diving, running pose with like a leg up in the air or just one toe, something like that, you're going to have to glue them to the base. They're not going to be stable. They need both feet. So that also limited a bit about how I could build them, but I'm still happy with them. Now, the weapons on them, you can see here in the picture throwing up here, is they are pretty equivalent for the most part in terms of size and design to the existing weapons on the smaller walkers that PHR has always had, with the exception of the shield. I think that's just because they took the shield from the Zeus and put it on the model and probably just felt it looked too small. And so to make it a little more visually impactful or fit the size of these models, bumped it up in scale a little bit, which I think looks fine. These are all quite magnetizable. They have either a hollow spot you can just slot a magnet in on the weapon arms, or just a spot you could probably pretty easily drill in. And all of them, with the exception of one, can go on either arm as well. The cannon missile arm here, it has to go on the right side. If you put it on the left, it would have to be upside down and it would look very silly. So you can't do that. I would recommend magnetizing them just because if you want to use them for drop zone, the Rashner in particular has a thing where it can essentially mix and match all the melee weapons. So you could have like a hammer and a sword, 2 swords, sword and a gladius, I think it's called. So that'd be a pretty good idea to magnetize. In the box, you could build 2 of any particular variant if you only wanted them for drop zone. But if you want to use them accurately modeled for Artemis, you're going to have to build 1 of each like this.
So, something that's interesting to me about these models, in addition to just the rules in the models themselves, is their names. So, going from left to right here, we have the Aegis, the Mithra, the Dahaka, and the Rashnu. Now, in Drop Fleet and Drop Zone, PHR models have always derived their names from either Greek, Roman, or Norse mythologies. And now these are actually drawn from a completely different religious tradition. All the names are from Zoroastrianism. Now, I'm probably going to show my whole ass here because I'm only a bit familiar with this religion. And so I could be missing things completely. But in any case, some of these names I'm familiar with at least. I think Mithra is probably the most well known one because it had a tradition that extended into Roman Mithraism as well. So it's a bit more well documented.
Rashnu, I had also heard of because it's associated with Mithra in Zoroastrianism. They were both deities serving as like judgment figures, along with, I think, a third figure that is not one of these four names. And they are both Yazada, which is a deity, a holy figure, that kind of thing. Now, the specifics of what these figures were actually known for, or represented, is basically irrelevant in terms of the name selection for the units here, because there hasn't always been the strongest link between the name selection and what the unit actually does. There are some units that do have a bit of a link, and I'm sure they pick ones where they can. And in a broad sense, you have like bigger, more important names for bigger, more important units, but it's not a strict thing they hold themselves to super tightly. And all these names, when I was reading everything, I couldn't really find a particular link between the name and what the unit did. Now, Dahaka is where things start taking a bit of a turn. Dahaka is actually an evil figure, not a holy deity like the other two. Like a demon, some sort of bad king, something along those lines. And actually has multiple names. Dahaka doesn't seem to be its primary name. That actually seems to be something more like a Zahak. But in any case, Agus is the one that really caused me issues here. So, of course, the first thing I did was just plug the name into a search engine, and I found some interesting results. I mean, here she is with her famous bad luck owl and evil snake. Or I found other equally respectful depictions of the figure. So, after a bit of this nonsense, I decided I needed to just go directly to the source, and I went to the Avesta, the holy text of Zoroastrianism. Searching through there, I found Mithra no problem, Roshni wasn't an issue, Dahaka was in there, but I didn't find a single mention of Agus. Now, it's always possible that it's a translation thing, and this name is being pulled from somewhere else, and this translation doesn't have it, but I'm going to expect that there was not a scholar of ancient Iranian religion working at TT Combat, so it's probably just something surface level from a common English translation. I did, however, find that there's quite a few mentions when I was looking through the hot anime babe depictions of this ancient virgin deity about this god, demon, whatever figure being the evil eye. And there are multiple mentions in the text of the evil eye, but still nowhere near them could I see anything that could even be misconstrued as the word Agus. So, still having no luck finding the true source of the original word, I decided to take to Google Scholar and see if I could look up the evil eye specifically. And I came across a 2011 paper from Tarbiyat Madares University in Tehran about the evil eye. And in it, I at last found some actual mention of Agus from a more reliable source than a random website, given that this is an actual peer-reviewed paper. This is a bit of a dead end for me at this point, though. The only way I'm going to verify the actual true meaning of this word anymore is if I started bothering some Persian studies department, I think, and I'm not going to go that far. Of course, the question is, where did they get the name from? And I am pretty sure this list here, it was copy and pasted over multiple websites and posts and whatever when I was trying to dig into Agus. And I'm 90% certain they just said, I don't know, Zoroastrian gods or something, and came across the list and picked a couple that sounded cool to them, because all four names are on the list. All right, so just a few comments on some of the other components that come in the box. First up, the decks. Each faction gets a set of about 30-ish cards, different triggers, different effects, shake up things game to game. Great, whatever. They don't come with sleeves. I sleeve them myself. I picked up Euro card sleeve size. I measured them about 60 by 90-ish millimeters each, and they work pretty well. The issue I have with the cards is just more of a production quality control thing. They're mostly fine, but there's a couple of cards. For example, here's the PHR one. This is the most real actual issue here. So this is the order they come printed in. If you look at the flavor text, you can see running responsiveness. This was clearly supposed to be on here, and this is carried over from this. So some sort of collation or error, I'm not sure. And also, this a couple of cards are like this. The font is weirdly larger, and this also doesn't have punctuation. At first, I thought, oh, this is just because it's a single line, and it just made a larger result. But no, most of the rest of the ones that are on a single line are the same font size. Fauna has one or two that are like that as well. It's not a huge deal, obviously. It's just a flavor text, but it's the sort of thing I would hope you would pick up a little bit of quality control. Next, we have the noise meters here. These are just folded cardboard. I spent a little. They had a little bit of like natural lift to them. I just left them under a book overnight, and they're flat enough now. And also the pop out cardboard tokens. You get like one set. Well, excuse me, you get two sets in the box. And I don't really understand why, because it's not necessary for the rules. I suppose if you're splitting the box with someone, they take Fauna, you take PHR, you could each get these, and you could then play a game if you use proxies without having to have the other person there. But it's just a little unusual. Just to focus on one, my critique of the noise meter in particular is that how it works is different actions will either raise or lower your noise, which is this token here. And once you cross over 5, so every 5, so you hit here, 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 the threat level goes up and the fauna get more dangerous. Which, great, okay, interesting mechanic. But I wish on the meter here, there was a clearer visual delineation between each threat level. It's not super difficult, but I think at a glance, if you could just be like, oh, this is a nice thick line, it'd be nice for during the game. But yeah, the tokens also, these are for the biohazard beacons, which are the primary objectives in most of the scenarios. Got your fauna activation tokens, PHR activation tokens, the noise meter is mentioned, and this, I believe, is for tracking overheats. One of the PHR mechs has a laser that can overheat and stops working for a round or something like that, and that's to keep track of it. Lastly, just on the terrain, comes with these nice cardboard terrain bits, and I think they're perfectly fine for what they are. I'm just not going to be using them myself. Nothing against them. I just already have a bunch of Dropzone terrain that's already been done up all pretty, and I'm going to use that.
So I am not going to play a game just yet. I set up the table with my own terrain features. The paper mat here is the only thing that actually comes in the box, and also, I suppose, the tokens I have here for the objectives. But I think it looks pretty nice. The mat design, I think, does a great job of having that sort of messy, overgrown, abandoned city sort of feel. My problem with it is just the folds are a pain because it comes folded in the box. And I did have this laying out for a while, some books on it, try to flatten them best I could. It's only so much you can do. It's a bit flimsy. I really, really would have liked to see, although I'm sure from a manufacturing and distribution perspective, this was just not feasible at a price point they'd want to do if they were even interested. But obviously, don't do like a neoprene mat kind of thing, but just put it on a actual cardboard board, like that comes in a board game kind of box, one of those folding ones. That would really elevate this up a lot, I think. If I end up playing this game more than a handful of times, I might even look into just trying to do that myself and just gluing this on my own sort of thick cardboard stock kind of thing. But we'll see how the durability of it goes over time as well. The rulebook it comes with, there's just one thing that I thought was interesting I wanted to comment on. In the credits here, the sculpting, you have Dave Lewis, of course, because he is the creator of the whole thing. War Games Atlantic, who I suppose is the one doing the plastic manufacturing for TT Combat now. Now, what I wonder is, Dave Lewis has always been insistent that he just cannot do anatomy, essentially. He does the vehicles, the ships, buildings, whatever. But I guess he just can't draw people or whatever. And so for the fauna, I'm wondering if either someone is uncredited or War Games Atlantic actually does some sculpting for them as well, because I'm going to assume that Dave did the PHR walkers.
But or maybe he's just branching out his skills more and is in fact doing the fauna now. In which case, good for you, Dave. All right, I think that's about all I have to say on it now. Hopefully, I'll be able to get a game in somewhat soon, and we'll see if I record it or not. If not, I'll at least throw together a little bit of a summary of thoughts on it after the fact. Thanks.